From Washington, this is VOA News. The United States reaffirms a partnership with Egypt. Pakistani Taliban names an interim chief. I'm Ray Kouguell reporting from Washington. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Saudi Arabia, part of a 9-day diplomatic mission to the Middle East and Europe. Secretary Kerry hopes to strengthen diplomatic ties with Saudi Arabia, frayed by differences over U.S. policy on Syria and Iran. He arrived late Sunday in Riyadh for talks with King Abdullah. Earlier in the day, Secretary Kerry met with Egyptian civilian and military leaders in Cairo. VOA's Scott Stearns reports.
Kerry says it's no secret that Egypt is going through difficult times following July's military-backed takeover. Taking questions from reporters following talks with Foreign Minister Nabil Fahmy, Kerry did not mention the former president by name, but said it's important that civilians face civilian justice.
Minister Fahmy and I agreed on the need to ensure that Egyptians are afforded due process with fair and transparent trials.
In response to violence that followed the coup that toppled Mr. Morsi, the United States delayed the delivery of some major weapons systems. But Washington is continuing most of its military aid. Mr. Morsi's supporters and the Muslim Brotherhood believe the United States is choosing Egypt's military over its young democracy. Scott Stearns, VOA News, Cairo.
Security is tight ahead of the trial of Egypt's deposed President Mohamed Morsi, scheduled to open Monday in Cairo. VOA's Elizabeth Arrett has more.
Mr. Morsi is charged with inciting murder during clashes outside the presidential palace last year, sparked by his temporary claim of extraordinary powers. 14 other senior members of his Muslim Brotherhood and his former government are also being tried. Other charges are pending. It's unclear if Mr. Morsi will appear in person or by video link. He's been held in an undisclosed location since he was toppled by the military July 3rd following mass protests. A member of his legal team has rejected the court's jurisdiction. Ahmed Abdul says they don't recognize the legal proceedings, but in conceding the trial would go ahead, he insisted there must be a live international broadcast of all sessions. Elizabeth Arrett, VOA News, Cairo.
Iran's supreme leader gave new support to President Hassan Rouhani's negotiations with Western nations over the country's nuclear program. During a speech to a group of students on Sunday, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said no one should consider the negotiators as compromisers and warned that nobody should weaken them during what he called a difficult mission. Iranian diplomats will be holding another round of talks later this week in Geneva with negotiators from the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany. A landmark local election in Kosovo was marred by violence and voter intimidation in a minority Serb-dominated northern region of the majority ethnic Albanian state. A group of masked men broke into several schools housing polling stations in the Kosovo town of Mitrovica as voting was underway Sunday. They smashed windows and ballot boxes and tore up election materials, forcing authorities to cancel voting for the remainder of the day. Serbs are voting in Kosovo's elections for mayors and local councilors. The Pakistani Taliban named an interim chief after the death of Hakimullah Masood in a drone strike. The Taliban spokesman says he is Asmatullah Shaheen Bitani, a leader of the Central Shura leader. Pakistan's government has protested the drone strike that killed Masood, saying the U.S. was sabotaging Pakistani peace talks with the domestic Taliban by killing the group's leader. The M23 rebels in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have called for a ceasefire after being pushed from one of their last strongholds. The military has not responded to the call, which comes as rebels are being attacked by government forces near the border with Uganda. A full solar eclipse passed over Africa Sunday, briefly darkening skies as it moved across the continent. The full eclipse was only visible along a narrow path in Africa that ended over Ethiopia and Somalia. A partial eclipse was visible far away as eastern North America and southern Europe. Sunday's was a rare hybrid eclipse in which the moon completely blocked the sun at times, leaving a ring of the sun visible at others. I'm Ray Kouguell, VOA News. Details on these and other stories on our website on the internet at voanews.com.